Hey guys, Greg here. Just a quick note before we start. Due to some weird scheduling conflicts, Ed had to record in a different location tonight outside, so that's why you might notice a little bit of background noise and some echo on his track. Not to worry, we'll be back at our regular studio situation next week, but if you were wondering, that's what's going on this week. Thanks. On this week's episode, we talk to Phra Pandit about novice monks.
So, if you ever wondered why there's a bunch of cute little kids running around in robes in Thai temples, you will learn a lot on this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who has been living in Bangkok so long he remembers when Paragon was just a lovely green park.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand 17 years ago, fell in love with sweating a lot, and never went home.
You're in the right place.
That's right, no doubt. So before we start, we want to say a quick thank you to one of our patrons, Tyler, who supports us at the show shout-out level. Stick around after we're done talking about Buddhist novices to hear some juicy gossip about Tyler.
So on this episode, we're happy to welcome back our friend Phra Pandit, who comes on the show to give us the inside scoop on those kids you see walking around in monks' robes, also known as novices. I've always wondered, are they full-on monks? Are they trainees? Are they interns? Half monks? Like, where do they come from, and what happens to them after they leave the temple? Or do they even leave the temple? So, as usual, Phra Pandit listens to my dumb questions and explains with patience and grace. Well, Pandit, my venerable friend, thank you for coming back on the Bangkok Podcast. We always appreciate your insights, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Well, on this show, I wanted to get an idea, a bit more insight into one aspect of Buddhism that I have no idea about. There's a lot of those, but this one in particular, I wanted to talk about novices. Now, when I think of a Buddhist novice, I think of those little kids you see walking around in full Buddhist robes and everything like that, but might not be the full picture. Can you explain to me what a novice is?
Okay, so you're quite right. In Thailand, when you talk about novices, it's the little boys, and that's what we want to focus on today. But Technically, a novice in Thai is called a samanera, which comes from the word samanera. And samanera is the word for someone who is ordained in India. Now, this word predates Buddhism, so it kind of meant the rough general lineage of people who would shave their head and wear rag robes and live in the forest. These would be the samanera. And so the Buddha was also a samanera, but after he introduced the whole, Buddhism, he introduced a further ordination procedure where one who is already a samanera is ordained as a Buddhist monk. So this tradition has continued, and people can ordain as a samanera. It actually means a novice. And it used to apply to an adult who was a full-on renunciate. But these days in Thailand, what it means is young boys, when they go into the temple, they are not allowed to ordain as a fully ordained Buddhist monk because they're under 20 years old. But they can ordain as a samanera, which is a novice. So The original term meant like a novice monk. But nowadays in Thailand, it actually means a boy who isn't yet old enough to become a monk.
Someone under 20?
Usually under 20. I mean, there are cases of adults being samanera too. For some reason, they might not want to ordain as a fully ordained monk. There are also some reasons for people to stay as a samanera and not ordain as a monk. And the primary one of these is quite interesting. In the Thai Buddhist system, all the monks and novices and nuns too are supposed to learn Pali language. And the Pali is a 9-level course. Now, if you've passed all 9 levels before your ordination, you get a very special ordination at the Emerald Buddha temple in Sanam Luang, and it's a royal ordination, and you're called a Naga ordinee.
Ooh, Naga.
Yeah, and it's a big thing. I mean, if you attain that as your ordination, that's quite a big thing. You probably make quite a bit of money out of it too.
That's nice.
So, well, people want to support these novices who are, very well educated in Pali language. So, if, say, a novice is getting to about 19, 20, 21, and he's got his sights set on that final examination, he might decide to put off his ordination in order to take that special ordination.
Interesting. Well, let's back up a little bit. So these kids, say you're a 10 or 11-year-old kid, why would you be in a monastery ordained as a samanera? Why wouldn't you be in school?
Right. The reasons for this,
no offense,
are numerous, but primarily families who have had some kind of problem. For example, their parents are drug addicts, or they've died, or something like that. They will put the child into a monastery to study, is one reason. Another reason might be the child is going a bit wayward. If he's got involved in gangs or in drugs, or in fact, in some cases, if they're homosexual, then they're shoved into the temple thinking that will clean them up, that will make them a good person, or that will straighten them out. Another reason might be purely economic. The parents simply don't have the money to do it. Another reason might be that the kid likes it, that they actually want to be in a monastery. Now, very often, I'm not sure how it works up country, but in Bangkok, certainly most of the young novices have come from up country. So this is one way that families can send their children to Bangkok to study in the temples, get an education without having to pay money.
Wow, I've seldom been had a question of mine answered where I feel like such an ass for asking the question. that was a really good answer, and I wasn't suggesting that sending your kid to school automatically is the end all be all solution to everything. So those are very good reasons.
Well, every child should be educated, and the temples do offer a form of education. Now, it wasn't very long ago when all educated people in Thailand came from temples. It wasn't very long after that even that all schools in Thailand actually belonged to temples. And even today, you'll find that most schools around the country are actually built in temple grounds. There's one directly outside my window right here. So there is a long tradition of the temples providing an education. There's another aspect to this that in Thai tradition, superstition, it is considered that if a person is going to get married, the woman will tend to choose somebody who has been a monk in the past. And previously, this meant that person had learned some self-discipline from the living as a monk and also had been educated. So if you are an ex-monk, you are called a tit. And this is short for Pandit, which is my name, but it means one who has studied, one who has learned. So there is a tradition that women would not marry a man unless he's a tit.
Okay.
And so...
I'm such a child, but okay.
Very often, men or young guys will actually go and ordain for a few days or a few weeks just so that they can be a pandit and have that ordination so that they're ready to get married.
Okay, I guess it's similar to in Western cultures where you come from he went to this school or he comes from this family or something like that. It's a little bit of a leg up on your competition, so to speak.
Another thing is that many of the temples actually offer a fairly good education. I mean, the kids are well looked after. It's like a boarding school, I guess. I mean, they're well fed. fed well enough, they're looked after well enough, they're kept out of trouble, they're not out on the streets at night, they're not getting people pregnant, they're not drinking, they're not taking drugs. And very often the temples provide, or good temples can provide, a reasonably comprehensive education. Not as good as a proper school would provide, I think, in the modern day. But many of these temples do have the goso no, which is the outside education. And people in the temples can gain a certificate equal to high school. And then they can go and study in the monks' universities, of which there are 2. And they can get a degree, an MA, and a PhD. So it's not, it does offer a fairly decent route for people to become educated. Now, there is a problem with this, though, that these various nefarious reasons for people to become monks means that very often it's not the best of the population that actually go and take ordination. It's actually quite well known that in a family, if they have 2 or 3 boys, and one of them is a bit dim-witted or a bit useless or a bit hopeless, stick that one in the temple and get some merit, and they'll keep the good ones at home. I mean, this happens. This does happen in Thailand. So,
well, where I went to high school, my high school was right next door to a Catholic girls' school, and of course, everyone wanted to have a girlfriend from the Catholic girls' school because that's where all the parents sent their bad daughters to get straightened out. So I'm familiar with the concept.
Okay, I'm glad you're comparing the Thai Buddhist novices with Catholic schoolgirls, but okay. There's one more element to this story, and that is my own university. And in the university, the idea behind it is that monks would be able to come and get an education that's on the same level as ordinary lay people. They feel that monks shouldn't be lacking in education if they're going to be leaders in society. But also, they recognize that many of the monks don't want to be monks. So these kids who were thrown into the temple long before they really are old enough to make a choice. And one of the problems was they didn't have a route to get out of the temple. So the university was, a big part of the university is set up to give these young novices who would ordain as monks an education. And they'll study for 4 years. And then on the 5th year, they will work for the university. And the university will give them a placement somewhere in society so that if they wish to disrobe, they've got something that they can walk straight into. And so it's quite an effective system. People might wonder why the universities are set up to help monks disrobe. But our feeling is that we're putting people into society who are reasonably well educated, who have had a discipline and a good upbringing in a temple, who know how to control themselves, they've practiced meditation, they know Buddhist teachings, and they will be good citizens that we're putting into society.
Right. And if they're not really feeling it, they don't want to dedicate their life to it, then there's no reason, it's no good to force them to do that. So you might as well harness their good intentions and their upbringing and their energy towards something more productive, giving back to society. And they can always say, like, I came out of the monks' university, or I came out of this novice education, and I'm giving back to society now.
And I'm a tit.
Well, let's talk a little bit about you've got a kid who's a ruffian, a hellion, and you think that putting him in a monastery will sort him out. What do you do? Is there a form you got to fill out? Do you just walk up to a monastery and say, "Hey, over to you"?
Pretty much, monasteries will take anybody. Usually, they would go to the local monastery where they know the abbot, and they can get the ordination. There are also monasteries that take in a lot of kids, and they're well known to be, reasonable. Now, obviously, the trouble is that all of these kids, they've not chosen this life. Sometimes they're only like 9 or 10 years old, and they're being asked to live as a renunciate monk. That is, eating only in the morning, not allowed to watch football or play football. Obviously, will have no sexual encounters. They'll never have a chance to kiss a girl or investigate their sexuality in any way. So on every intellectual level that you look at it, it has to be considered to be a bad idea, putting these children unwillingly into this situation. But the thing is that from my observation, it actually works. I think it's a bit like the House of Lords in England. It's a ridiculous institution, but it kind of works.
With the wigs and everything, right?
So, the whole system might not be set up in the best possible way, but it does kind of work, that these kids do go in and very often they develop a pretty strong relationship to their temple. I mean, I know people in their 50s and 60s who still come back to the temple where they were novices, or, they still strongly relate to that time in their life. So, it's not the best system, but it does kind of work.
The only thing that I can sort of connect this to my own life is that I haven't talked about this on the show before, but when I was a kid, I was a really rotten little kid.
I can believe that.
Oh, thanks, man. When I was about 12 years old, my mom put me in a special program for wayward youth for several months. And I lived at a hospital, like on the top floor of a hospital with other wayward youths. And there was counselors there, and you had a very regimented day. And it wasn't prison, but you weren't allowed to leave, and you had to have meetings and talks and stuff like that. And I hated it at first. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be with my friends, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of it, I came out and I had a much greater respect for rules and respect for adults and myself, and I learned a lot. So it's not obviously not a direct parallel at all, but I get what they're doing, and it's sort of like making the best of an unfortunate situation, which could probably be seen from the point of view of the kid that might not want to be there at the beginning.
Yeah, it might be something like the army. People come out of the army. I was watching a show, and they were looking at army mothers, that is, mothers of boys who'd gone into the army, and they were all really impressed that a year after they sent away this really terrible, wretched, angry, violent kind of kid, and then they come back and they make their own beds in the morning, and the mothers are very impressed with this. So discipline, living a disciplined life is a beautiful thing.
I agree. No, you said that novices are not ordained to the same level as a full monk. What are the differences there?
Technically, the Samanera are ordained with 10 rules, whereas the monks are ordained with, there's about 3,000 or 4,000 rules in the rule book, in the Vinaya rule book for monks. However, in the temple, the novices will be expected to pretty much live the same way as the monks, regardless. So the big difference really is just a technical stage of ordination. You have to go through an extra ceremony to up your ordination into full monkhood. Now, there's a question with women at the moment, in that many women have actually ordained as samaneras. There's no reason why they can't do that. But women have been asking, or some women have been asking, for full ordination into the higher ordination, if you like.
That seems to be a pretty controversial thing right now, or has been for several years anyway, where I've seen headlines every couple of weeks about some controversy or some argument or some important figure has said something that others don't agree with.
Yeah, you've got one particularly vociferous, like monk-hating woman in the Bangkok Post who likes to write about this stuff and churns out, regurgitates these articles every couple of weeks, mentioning no names. So it is an issue, and there have been the full ordination for women has been reintroduced, especially in the West, but a little bit in Thailand. So that's changing, and it's, that's being fixed.
Interesting. Okay. Well, as we're wrapping up here, if I went to a temple and I said, I want to become a novice,
I'm not sure we'd let you in, Greg.
Well, you know me, so I would go somewhere else. But say someone who didn't know me and I said, I want to be a novice. would that be something that is possible?
Sure. But as an adult male, usually you would ordain as a monk, not as a novice. Although, as I said, in the ordination procedure, you would actually take Samanera ordination first and then take a second procedure to go into being a bhikkhu.
Okay, I see. So if I'm an adult Samanera, would I be considered as like the same, for lack of a better word, rank as a young kid who is a Samanera?
Yes, you'd go and sit with the kids.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Interesting, just like Thanksgiving.
It's interesting that a lot of these kids are really kind of bright. And one of the things with monks, especially senior monks, is as an adult human being, you do get a kind of desire to look after the next generation. So very often, like the senior monks really look after these novices and these kids, and it really becomes like a second home for them. I just feel a little bad because, really they just want to go and play football and they want to play computer games and they want to know what girls are and, all the regular things that a teenage boy would want to do. And they don't get access to that kind of thing.
Well, plenty of other countries have kids that are, like you said, in military school and boarding school and whatever. So I can see that, but I don't think it's the end of the world.
I did talk to some Tibetan Rinpoches, and these are the senior Tibetan monks, and usually they're considered to be a reincarnation of a former teacher. And so very often at 4, 5, 6 years old, they've been identified as a reincarnation and then taken into the monastery and put in this difficult situation where monks are coming to bow to them when they're 6 years old. So my usual question when I come across one of these Rinpoches is I say, well, can you remember your past life? And they inevitably say no. And I said to one of these Rinpoches, I said, what was it like being a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid and having people come and bow to you? And he said, well, I just saw all my friends playing outside and I wanted to go and join them, but I couldn't.
That's a bit sad.
It is. It's very sad. So, I think this novice ordination system, there's something wrong with it. But, like I say, it kind of works. Okay. It does produce these nice, well-adjusted kids who go back into society. Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, as we're wrapping up here, a last question. Have you had any personal experiences with these novices? Have you seen anything that's made you change your opinion on anything? Or
Yeah, I mean, when I first moved to Bangkok, I was put in a building out the back of the temple. It had never been painted. You had footprints all over the roofs and walls where the workmen had walked over the boards. It was a really bad building. There's one large bathroom for everybody, like 60 people. And nearly all of the people there were novices. There's only about 4 or 5 monks, and we weren't designated to look after the kids. The thing that impressed me was just how well behaved they were without supervision. I mean, they were really well-adjusted kids. Of course, they play a bit of football or something with rolled up socks, or they might be up a little late at night or play music and stuff. But I was just impressed. There is no way on this earth you could have put a bunch of 50 English kids from 10 to 20 years old in a situation like that and not have flames and not have things burning down. You wouldn't be able to do it. So the thing that really impressed me was just how well adjusted these kids are, even unsupervised.
That's interesting. Well, thanks. That was a really a quick and condensed insight into these novices, and I there's a lot of stuff there that I just didn't know. So hopefully our listeners got a little bit out of that too. That's really fascinating. So next time I see kids wandering around, I won't look at them and go like, shouldn't they be in school anymore? And now that I understand, there probably might be greater benefits to just sitting in a classroom listening to a teacher drone on. It's not for everyone, that's for sure.
Yeah. And one thing I might recommend is if you are in temples and you see these novices around, most people go and make offerings to monks. So if you see the novices, go and give them 20 baht, 40 baht, so they can buy something that they need. or go and give them some food or some ice cream or something because they appreciate it.
Right on. That's good advice. Well, thank you, my venerable friend, for coming on the show once again, and we will get you back here again in the not too distant future. Thank you, sir.
Okay, and keep up the good work with the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you. Really interesting. And I mean, when I was a kid, my mom put me and my sister into Sunday school and brought us to church regularly, gave some structure to our lives.
You didn't have to wear a robe, though.
No, I didn't have to wear a robe. I'm kind of glad she only went as far as church. It did require special clothes, but nothing as severe as a robe for me. All right, let's shake things up a bit with some word association this week. And this is a new feature we're playing with where one of us says 3 words or phrases and the other guy replies with the first thing that comes into his head, kind of a Bangkok-based psychology test. Is that what you'd call it? A psychoanalysis?
I guess so. It's potentially dangerous because you never know what's going to come out of your mouth first.
All right. Well, Ed doesn't know what I'm going to say, so you can play along too at home when you're listening. So Ed, this week I'm going to give you 3 little terms, and you say the first thing that comes into your head.
Gotcha.
Here we go. Chao Phraya River.
Dirty.
Hualampong train station.
Som Tom Cellars.
Emporium shopping mall.
Old school.
Those are pretty good.
You know, some of these are going to require some explanation because I have to cross the Chao Phraya every day, right. And I have no problems whatsoever, and I really appreciate how wide it is because I used to take a boat in the Klong, and in the Klong, it's so narrow that water splashes up, and it can splash right into your eye.
Right.
I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but it's like there's just little particles of water flying around on the Klong, and you know the water is not clean, and so you can get an eye infection. But I do think the Chao Phraya is not clean, and I would never swim in it.
No.
You know?
Do you remember you were in this story about 12 years ago, New Year's Eve? You and I and a bunch of people rented a little boat, and we went out on the river for the fireworks, which was a great night.
I was there.
Except the fireworks misfired, and 3 people fell off the boat because the fireworks came right at our boat, and everyone sort of jumped back a bit. And 3 people fell in the river.
That's right. I mean, that was a night that it could have been disastrous. I mean, because we were drinking. It was a classic recipe for disaster. Yeah. And three people went in the river, but luckily they got pulled on the boat very quickly afterwards.
Yeah, but I still don't envy those, like, just drenched in that brown, goopy water. Ugh.
Yeah, it's not good, especially on New Year's Eve.
Yeah, no doubt.
But I believe they survived all right. So I don't really, I actually like the river, and I like being on the river and near the river, but I would never swim in it.
I would say your Hualampong train station Somtam vendors was right on the money. That's kind of what I think of too.
Okay, well here's why. And so I have a somewhat twisted reason for saying Somtam seller. It's because a Thai guy once asked me to explain air quotes. And I explained, well, it's usually ironic in that whatever word you're putting quotes around you don't agree with. So I gave the example because he was a political science student, and I gave the example, and I said, the People's Democratic, in quotes, the People's Democratic Republic of Laos.
Right.
With democratic in quotes. And he's like, oh, I get it. And then he said, and now this is fascinating, and I'm curious what you think about this. He said to me, so at Hualampong Station, I could talk about the Som Tam Cellars. And he put Som Tam Cellars in quotes.
That makes perfect sense to me. Do you know why?
At the time, I did not know why he did. Like, I was like, "What do you mean?" So I thought he misunderstood air quotes because I'm saying no. Like, that's not ironic because they're actually Som Tam Cellars.
Oh.
But then he explained to me that I don't know, they're bar girls or prostitutes or something.
Yeah, if you go outside of Hualampong Station, a lot of nights, and not right near the station, but a little bit out front on the sidewalk on Ramaphore Road, right next to where that goes down to the subway, there's a lot of girls selling somtam on little baskets sitting on the ground. They've got mangoes and fruit and stuff like that. But if you look closely, a lot of that fruit is fake. And they're actually selling a different service.
And Greg, how do you know this?
I've been here a long time, man. I'm people who know people. I'm a guy who knows things.
So you've heard about this from other people?
Yeah. To be totally honest, I've only heard about it. Even if I was in the market for that kind of thing, I wouldn't go to the sidewalk in front of Wollongong Station.
It's such a weird cover, selling Som Tum as a cover.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's how I learned. I did not know about this, even though I'd been in Thailand a long time. I knew nothing about these Som Tum / like streetwalkers, and so
that's interesting. I don't know if they're still there. I mean, they up until about a year ago, I remember walking by and seeing them. So, yeah. But it's funny because I think of Som Tam sellers also, but I think of the legit ones inside because Wollongong Station has actually a surprisingly good food court.
Yeah, it does. It's not bad, no doubt. I've been there. Yeah. And what was the third?
And your last one was Emporium Shopping Mall, old school. Yeah, I would agree with that.
I remember when Emporium was cool. And I guess they have spruced it up a bit, but Bangkok they're so into building new malls that I think as a mall, it's pretty hard to stay hip for very long.
Yeah. When I moved here, there was MBK and there was Emporium. Those were the two like really big malls downtown.
Well, there was also Central, but you're right. There's also Central World.
Yeah, but remember back then, Central World was the World Trade Center, and it was a shit mall. It was a terrible, dingy, dark place that no one went to.
I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you're right. It was not, the World Trade Center was not really hip or anything. It was giant, It was cavernous, and you're right. It wasn't very nice.
No.
So, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd like to say thank you to Tyler for lending us his support at the show shoutout level. And Greg, what did you find out about Tyler?
Well, check this out. As it turns out, Tyler lives in the USA, and he sings in a barbershop quartet.
For real?
Yeah, for real. Now, barbershop quartets are not known as the coolest type of musical groups, but I did some digging into it, and it turns out Tyler is so dedicated to his craft, he's kind of a badass. Now, check this out. I saw a document online where he described his warm-up before every show, and
really?
He warms up his vocal cords by singing the opera from The Fifth Element. You remember that blue lady?
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah, he's pretty good. Her name was Diva Plava Laguna, if you're a huge movie nerd like I am. So he sings that, and then he switches over to some Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then, if he has time, he does a rendition of Social Sterility from the classic album Enslavement to Obliteration by Napalm Death.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
A very unusual guy.
Yeah, the guy's talented.
No doubt.
And to top it all off, Ed, I'm not sure if you know this, but those silly boater hats that barbershop quartets wear, they have razor blades around the edges.
Oh, really? Wow. I guess.
Yeah, he's like Mr. Oddjob from Goldfinger.
I guess we have all learned something about barbershop quartets tonight.
That's right. So thanks for the support, Tyler, and be careful taking off that hat, eh?
No doubt. Before we wrap up, I'd like to give a special thanks to all of our patrons who are listening now. As everyone knows, we don't run ads for this show, so we really, really do appreciate the support we get from our patrons. And if you want to get in touch with us, we are at Bangkok Podcast on Facebook and Twitter, or you can send us a message via the contact form on bangkokpodcast.com. We're very good at replying to any messages you send.
You can also find us online where we post each episode and carry on conversations with our listeners. You can also reach out to me directly on Twitter if you so wish, where I am BKK Greg. So thanks for listening, folks, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
It used to be a really good site, and it seems to me like such kind of a, who says that? An idiot, I'll tell you who.